Hey guys, welcome to the first edition of Fun Time with Instrument Histories. In just a second, we're going to be going over some general information about the flute, and then every week we're going to go through in pretty much score order and talk about instruments and different things, and afterwards it's going to be followed with a quiz. So make sure that during this video you take some kind of notes. Um, it's not going to be anything super drastic. The main points are going to be written on the screen. If you want to write down some extra stuff, that'll be great. Keep it, store it in your folder, um, start a collection. Especially those of you that go on to do music at some point later on, things that are going to be really important. All right, so let's get to it. Alright, first up is Intro to Flute. Right at the top of every score that I read, we have the piccolo and then flute. Alright, the oldest flute that has ever been found is 35,000 years old. What this means is that flutes and music predate most of what we think of as history. Being able to design a flute, where to poke the holes, how to do it in a way that makes notes, takes a lot of thought. It takes a lot of thought, it takes a lot of engineering. On modern instruments, a lot of science goes into that. So the fact that humans 35,000 years ago were able to trial and error their way into making music, making something that can imitate, the human voice and song is really pretty cool. Flutes and drums, of course, were two of the first instruments that were ever invented because they're pretty much the simplest. Those of you that had music in elementary school might remember playing the recorder. Flutes, of course, are relatively similar to recorders. They have holes and they're a tube that you play through. Now, as you remember, recorders face down when you play. That's actually going to come up later on. It's pretty important. One thing to remember about recorders is that they are not instruments originally made for little kids. They are simple instruments because they're old, used in the 1500s, but they used to be some of the lead solo instruments. Now, back in the Baroque era, and this is kind of going off on a little bit of a tangent, but back in the Baroque era, what they would do is that they'd get an instrument, and they'd make it different sizes. You'd have a soprano, an alto, a tenor, a baritone, a bass version of every instrument, and they'd actually play songs with just one kind of instrument. It was called a cohort. Recorders were one of these. And even today, if you look up on YouTube, you can find recorder ensembles, and bass recorders look super weird. But they're all different sizes with different pitches, and they play just like instruments do now. The ones that we're used to playing are the soprano ones. It's the ones that we normally see. They're the easiest. But as you can see from this picture here, nice ones could have a lot of craftsmanship to them. Of course, the crappy plastic ones we use don't sound great, but they sound really pretty if you want to look them up. Now, what happened around 1285 is that you got the transverse flute. That means flutes that are parallel to the ground when you play them. The one here is actually made out of wood. Now, we know that flutes are part of the woodwind family, but those who have ever touched a flute know they're made out of metal. Well, they used to be made out of wood, just like this one here. And notice there aren't any button mechanisms, nothing like that. It's basically a recorder that you play parallel to the ground. This allows different facility in the hands, and it allows the physics of the instrument to be just a little bit different. Now, over time, that was made into metal because wood is a little bit finicky and it doesn't sound as loud. Flutes are quiet instruments anyway. Wooden flutes are much, much quieter. And then as you can see from this picture here, they added in button mechanisms all over the place. Things to make it easier to close holes, to make it sound better. And even, these little buttons here make it lower pitched, where your fingers can't touch. And also add some extra notes, like accidentals. Like this key, if you can see the mouse on the screen, is for, what note is it? That's a G sharp, right? You just push that down, makes a G sharp. That note is hard to play on a flute that doesn't have that mechanism. Possible, but difficult. Now, the three main sections of the flute, and this is going to be something that comes up a lot in different woodwind instruments, is you have the head joint here at the top, where you have the tone hole, the lip plate that goes on your lip. You have the body, which is the middle section with most of the buttons. It's where both of your hands go. And you have the foot joint. So it's like a human body, right? You have a head, you have a body, you have a foot. One thing to remember, and this is not super important if you're not actually playing flute, but any of you that are curious, This rod on the foot joint lines up with these tone holes that'll make your pinky keys work easily. So it's 3 fingers up here, 1, 2, 3, and then 3 fingers down here, 1, 2, 3, and your pinky goes here, another pinky here, and your obviously mouth goes over here. Now for tuning a flute, in most band settings we tune to B flat or F, and they work pretty well on flute. But the best note to tune a flute to is A. Now by best I mean it's the note that's the most stable, and it's the note that's going to make most of the instrument in tune. As we all know, different instruments have different notes that tune differently. I'm going to show you that those specific notes in flute in a second. So if you try to get those notes in tune by adjusting the instrument itself, the rest of it's going to be out of tune. So in this case, A is a good note, B flat and F work pretty okay. And the way you tune a flute is just moving the head joint, right? You pull it out to make it longer, which makes it lower. Think making it more like a tuba, which has the most tubing. You push it in to make it go more sharp. Think of, a flute. You make it shorter, the pitch goes up. You can also adjust flute tuning by rolling the instrument, but that changes the tone quality. So usually what you want to do, and flute players this is important, what you want to do more is change the direction of the air more than you change the physical angle of the flute. Again, it can work in a pinch. It does affect tone quality. So you tune the whole instrument to an A, a B flat, or an F, or you can even check some combination thereof, and then you tune the rest of it with a combination of air speed and air direction. Now if you look on your screen here, these are the pitch tendencies for flutes. These are notes that are always going to be out of tune. It doesn't matter how good of a player you are, it doesn't matter how good your instrument is. Now, having a better instrument means that these notes won't be quite as bad as on lower quality instruments. A beginner instrument, these notes might be pretty far out, whereas on a professional instrument, they're definitely going to be out, but maybe less so. And professional musicians, one, have better instruments, but also learn how to adjust their air speed, learn how to adjust their embouchure and the air direction on these notes all the time to make them sound good. Whatever instrument you have, you always need to try to play it as in tune as possible. You need to teach yourself the adjustments on these notes. If you learn to play it out of tune, then you've learned to play it out of tune. So on these notes, you need to be aware and listen and always adjust every time you play it, even if it's just on a scale, if it's just on long tones. Always play it in tune. This is where tuners come in handy. Now, how do you get it into that middle? Okay. Don't always use tuners, but to see where these notes are. Now if you look, you have C sharp and D flat. On flute, this is all open. All open on every instrument, on every wooden instrument, is going to be off. Because what that means is that the smallest section of instrument is vibrating. If you don't press any buttons down, all that's vibrating is pretty much the top part of the instrument where you blow into. Acoustically, it doesn't work. So that's why C sharp and D flat, by the way, enharmonic notes, we're going to talk about that in a future lesson, they're the same note, same fingering, are both very, very sharp. Above the staff you have D sharp and E flat, okay, and that's more of a register thing because it's higher. These notes tend to go sharp. As you go above that, they flatten out a little bit. When you get way low on flute, you put down a lot of fingers, it tends to go flat. Right, using more of the instrument, your airspeed also has to be a little bit slower at the very, very bottom. So that tends to make it fall flat, and that's going to be true of most instruments minus the reed instruments. Use slower air, the pitch goes down. Here you have to kind of find that middle ground of your air has to be slow to get it low, but it can't be so slow that it goes flat and you can't let your embouchure completely, relax. These next notes are slightly sharp. C here, C above the staff, E above that. Again, that's just minor adjustments. Again, and C is close to C sharp, right? These notes are all close to other notes that are much, much more sharp, but they have slightly different fingers, and that helps it a little bit. These notes here, which again have a lot of fingers, D has every finger minus your pinky, D sharp has all your fingers. D sharp and E flat are the same note. When you have a lot of fingers down, they tend to go a little bit flat. Now, here's why concert F is not always the best note to tune to. it's a little bit flat. It's naturally a little bit flat. If your flute is perfectly in tune, this F is going to be just a little bit flat. So you can tune to it, but that means that a lot of other notes that are normal, notes that aren't on here, the B flat, the A here, those are all going to be just a little bit too high because you made a flat note in tune with your instrument. Not the end of the world, but it does make a difference. And then these are also slightly flat notes, and that's just based on the acoustics of the instrument. Okay, you have D, F, and F sharp, F sharp, F sharp, and G flat are the same note. And coming back to the last part, one of the big things that I'm introducing these videos to you, one of the big reasons is that a lot of you guys want to play other instruments. You want to play around in your friends' instruments, or maybe you have an interest in learning a different one. Maybe you're a flute player trying to learn tuba, or maybe you're a saxophone player who wants to play flute, or you want to play trombone or something. So in the course of this, it's partially to teach you about the instruments, things that we don't always know. It's also partially to give you the tools that if you decide to play them, you can use to start you off. Now, these are certainly not everything about the instrument. Before you start an instrument, you want to talk to me or some other professional so we can set you up correctly. Your friends can be a big help with this. They can help how to think about it, but of course, your friends haven't necessarily been trained to it, so there might be things that they tell you that are correct for them but not correct for everybody. Or maybe they just miss something you're doing that's wrong, so it's going to cause problems later on. So before you start an instrument, come and talk to us, but this will give you just a starting point, something to write down that you can keep in your mind. So the embouchure for a flute is you say poo. Okay, what that'll do is it pushes your corners forward a little bit, poo. It pushes your chin down, makes it flat, and it gives you this nice diamond shape in your aperture. Now the aperture is a little hole in your lips that the air goes through. Every instrument forms an aperture of some kind. What you don't want is to bunch your chin. Okay, you don't want to push up on your lips on any instrument. There's no instrument in the world where you push your lip up, at least there's no instrument in band instruments at least, where you push your chin up. You don't want to push your lips together. You hold them with the corners, right? So you want to pull the chin down if you need to make that lip more firm a little bit. You want to pull the chin down and keep it flat. If you push up, you're going to get tired really quickly and you're going to sound real mushed. It's just the way the physics work for pretty much every instrument. The difference with flute is it's a little bit softer, the whole face. You don't have to be super firm, right? On trumpet and clarinet, that chin's hard. It's flat and it's hard. On flute, it is flat, but the whole face is just a little bit softer, even if you're playing high. With articulation, flute has a variety of articulations. You use tu and do, tu, which is a little more firm, do, which is a little bit softer if you want more connected. Ta and da, again, the same thing. It'll change the sound a little bit, right? Ah versus oo changes the sound a lot. The way your tongue is affects the sound of the flute and any instrument. One thing to be careful of is that you don't want to articulate on your lips. You don't want to go thu, like you're spitting. You don't want to sound like you're spitting. You want the tip of the tongue to touch the top of the teeth, is what we say. The tip of the tongue touches the top of the teeth. And again, if you stick with these words, that should keep you pretty much where you're supposed to be. You don't say thu, 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 thu. That'd be weird. Even in Spanish, thu, thu. It's a little more tongue, but it's just not on your lips. And that will bring us to the end of this first part, this first installment of these videos. Make sure that you took whatever notes you needed. And after this, go into the quiz section of your class on Blend and go through that quiz. It's a short quiz. It only goes over some of the things we touched on here. Maybe not everything I said, but a lot of the stuff. And that's the quiz assignment for this week. So thank you all. Next week we will come back with double reads. Okay, next down in score order.